Hey, you're listening to Rising into Mindful Motherhood. I'm your host, Dr. Katie Wood. I'm a barefoot mama bear, pharmacist, integrative fertility health coach, and lover of all things nature and animals. I'm on a mission to have intentional conversations about the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to fertility, pregnancy, postpartum, and beyond. My mindful guest and I will be talking about struggles, wins, natural wellness, and how we grow and transform as we enter motherhood. My background in healthcare has shown me how broken our medical system is. My own struggles to become pregnant has shown the lack of support for mamas to be, the lack of guidance for women to have a nourishing and vibrant pregnancy, the isolation, mom guilt, and all the things we hold after bringing baby earthside. I want this platform to be a place where women can feel connected, safe, and supported to share and hear their stories. A place to use our voice to discuss and advocate about what we need and deserve as mothers. So let's dive in, shall we? Hello. I'm super excited to bring you this episode. In this episode, I have a pretty casual conversation with Rachel. She's a mama of 3. She's a registered dietitian, and now she's an entrepreneur and is working on building her own business as a mom, as an entrepreneur. And we just kind of talked about motherhood, our experience, what that's looked like, and, how integrating being an entrepreneur can have its challenges, but also benefits as a mother for our children. So without further ado, let's dive in, and I hope you enjoy. So remind me, how many kids do you have?
I have 3.
3. What are
Yeah.
their ages?
My daughter will be 6 in February, so she's 5, my oldest, and then I have a 3.5-year-old and a 19-month-old.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
How was it going from like 1 to 2 and 2 to 3? I'm curious about that all the time.
Yeah. I honestly would say that it was more, I mean, they were both challenging in their own way, but going from 1 to 2 felt like more jarring, I think, to my system, because when you have one, it's just like they get all of your attention, and you're so used to being able to give them that full amount of attention. So I dealt with a lot of just guilt, like having to split my attention and to, not give my full energy to my firstborn, anymore. And
Mhm.
navigating that dynamic. And she was only, they're about 2.5 years apart or so. So she was so young too. And just going through that. But going from 2 to 3, I guess in some ways it's like, obviously you have more experience with the whole process, and
Mhm.
even a little bit more into like the transition of like how this is going to change our family dynamic, and everyone's going to have to adjust. Um, but still, I mean, nothing can prepare you for that either. And you don't know how, especially the kids that young, are going to take it. And I
Mhm.
know for my middle, when I had the new baby, it was really challenging, really challenging for him, because my boys are less than 2 years apart. So he was really young when I had my youngest. And yeah, so that was a process.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I can imagine. My daughter's 3.5. And we go back quite a bit on whether we want to have another or not. And it's a little scary to think about because, like you said, I mean, she's been getting all of our attention for 3.5 years. So kind
Yeah.
of throwing a whole nother, a baby that requires so much attention into that mix, it would be really interesting to see. But I think she'd be such a wonderful big sister.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so different too, depending on age difference, like when they're super close, like mine are all, like I said, like 2.5 or less years apart. So that's a lot different than if, 3.5, 4 or more years apart. When they're older, they do have more, just a little bit more capacity to understand. And like, it's just going to be a lot different, versus when they're a little bit younger.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. We'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah.
Oh, so I think I saw a post of yours the other day. You said something about all of your children came in the world in different ways.
Oh, yeah, they
So what
did.
did that look like?
Well, my daughter, my oldest, was born in a hospital. But I was under the care of a team of midwives with her. So I knew, from the get-go, from my first pregnancy, I knew that I wanted to do more holistic. I wanted to go the more natural route and, aim for a natural birth and all of that. So at the time, the best care and resources that I had was the team of midwives that worked out of one of the hospitals locally. So she was born in a hospital with a midwife, which was great. And I had a doula for that birth. But yeah, I mean, it was so different because then both of my sons were born out of the hospital. So just that difference alone is so drastic and it's so different. So my older son was born at home, which was amazing. It was wonderful. We had a birth tub and we had it set up in his bedroom. Like everything went really smoothly and quickly. Thankfully all of my births and labors were pretty uneventful, like pretty smooth and pretty quick in the grand scheme of things. So I'm very grateful for that. And then my youngest, we had planned another home birth because we were so happy with the experience with my older son. And yeah, just the difference of like getting to be in the comfort of your own home and like not having to drive or travel anywhere or worry about that, not having people coming into your room, like all of these, the people that come in the hospital to check on all of these different things and ask you questions. Yeah, that difference alone was just so amazing. And it just allowed for a deeper bonding and just a quicker sense of normalcy, after the process of giving birth and, and that huge, massive kind of upheaval to your body and to your life that comes along with that. So we planned for another home birth, but our midwife had another mom that was in labor at the same time. So we ended up making the decision very last minute when I was in like active labor. I felt like I was already feeling the urge to push and everything. Or like we can either call like an EMT or like somebody to come here and you can just stay here and have the baby at home. Or we can drive in and we can go to the birthing center. So that's what we ended up doing. And it was pretty wild. I was having a contraction right as we were about to leave, like go out the door to get into the car. And my water broke, like leaning over the counter in my kitchen, all over my pants. And then I ended up just going into the car, and the whole ride there was very blurry. And thankfully we made it, with not that much time to spare. Like by the time I got up there, went up to the room and they had a tub set up already and the water was like this really nice temperature. And then I think it was like less than an hour later that my son was born. So
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And that they could just like take you in like that.
Yeah.
Without you having had that arranged, not like you can set a date really, but for a birthing center. But that's amazing that they had like an extra room and all that stuff for you.
Yeah, that capacity. And I think, it's really interesting just how, the connections with with all three of my children and how unique and different they are, and like the way that they came into the world. I just find that so endlessly fascinating. And I don't know if you see that in your daughter as well, like just part of her personality being mirrored in the way that she was kind of brought into the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we actually had a conventional birth. Like we were planning on having it in a hospital. I knew I wanted it to be a natural birth, so we had hired a doula, and we're like 30 minutes away from any hospital. So I had thought about having a home birth, but then my husband and I at the time were just like, there's no way, we live too far away. So we hired a doula, and she happened to live in the same small town that we live in, and she had had a home birth. So then I was like, okay, it is possible, And then I did the Mama Natural birth course. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it was amazing. I mean, no matter what you envision for your birth, if you want to go into the hospital and you want to have an epidural, or you don't want any of those things, it really educated you on all of the things that could happen, all of the cascades of interventions and things like that. And that was my deciding factor. I was like, we're doing it. We're going to have a home birth. So like halfway in the pregnancy, we switched. My doula recommended a midwife, and I'm just so, I know that I met our doula for a reason, because she, guided us to our midwife, and our midwife was absolutely amazing. She was such a blessing. And when we went to go meet her, I had about 3 pages of questions I had for her, because it's a big decision to make. I mean, I think, and it's not so commonly heard of, or at least at that time it wasn't. I feel like home births are becoming more common, for sure. So it was a big decision, and I really wanted to make sure that my husband felt comfortable with it too. And it was the best decision I ever made, for sure. I was in labor for 20 hours, which is, I think, fairly common for first-time moms, but I had a lot of back labor. I don't know if you ever experienced, oh my gosh. So we think that my daughter had her hand near her face, and really I couldn't even feel my legs. She was pushing on some nerve, and I couldn't even feel my legs. So we did have like the tub ready, but the tub, it didn't really give any comfort. The TENS unit was like my best friend, really, in terms of getting through that back labor.
What is that? A TENS unit?
Oh, so you put like a little sticker on wherever the area of pain is, and then you turn the dial up, and it sends like a little electromagnetic impulses. So it like distracts your brain a little bit from the other pain that is going on, pretty much.
Right. Okay.
So that was super, super helpful. But the back labor definitely got to a point where it didn't help. But it was just such an empowering experience doing that either way. And yeah, I highly recommend it for anyone who's comfortable doing it, for sure.
Yeah, same. I mean, any chance that I get to, kind of talk about my birth experiences, because, having 3 and them all being different, yet each one was very much empowering in its own way and very positive. I really don't have I don't have major birth trauma at all. Like, I'm very grateful and very lucky in that way. So I think it's important to share those stories, because there is so much negativity and so much fear around it. And that's obviously the mainstream, narrative that people hear, that women hear, and they automatically kind of recoil or, think that they could never do it, a natural birth or a home birth or whatever it might be, because they don't trust themselves, really,
Yeah.
That's what it usually comes down to.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think when you're in tune with your body and yourself, like listening to that gut feeling, like what feels right to you, where do you feel like you would be the most safe to have your birth? Because we're very primal beings. I mean, being in like a dark, safe, familiar place, like that's what our bodies want. And I knew deep down in my core that walking into a hospital with like all the lights and all the noises, I just could feel it in my body that would totally stall my labor for sure. So
Yeah.
I think that I made the best decision for me. A lot of my friends and family, some people thought that we were kind of maybe a little crazy for doing it. And I know like people were worried about everything, and it all worked out. And we had obviously a plan B if something were to go wrong. I mean, midwives are so educated on what they have to do if something does go awry. I'm not sure what state you're in. I'm in New York.
Oh yeah, I'm in New York too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you're having a home birth, I don't know if your midwife shared this with you, you have to go into labor by 42 weeks or they have
Right.
to transfer you.
Yeah.
My daughter, I did not go into labor until 41 weeks, 6 days.
Oh my gosh.
And that's her, I mean, to a T, like very
Yeah.
independent, a little stubborn, she likes to do things on her terms. So that's definitely very reflective in her personality. So it's funny to kind of think about that.
Yeah, for sure. My son was 1 week late, so exactly 41 weeks. And even that, it's like, yeah, it just, you get to that point when you're overdue that it just becomes so uncomfortable. And then you're also in this like this unknown, because it could happen at any moment, any time.
Mhm.
So that's a really tough, that's a really tough spot. The one birth that I had in the hospital went so smooth was because, I was a first time mom. I didn't really know like how far along I was. But what happened was that by the time I got to the hospital, I was so far along that I was already fully dilated by the time that I got there. So they
Wow.
checked me and I was already 10 centimeters. So I think that really contributed to, obviously, no interventions or like things going very smoothly for me. So I just wanted to say that because that's an option for people too, is like just waiting it out and
Mhm.
laboring more at home until you reach that place where where you're further along.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It definitely leaves less time for that cascade of intervention to start.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Yeah, that's amazing. I'm trying to think what I was going to say. For, yeah, for my daughter, we were walking every single day, like up until we were going to go for a walk like an hour before I started going into labor because we were just trying to get her to come out. And my midwife had this concoction that another midwife down south had come up with to kind of help coax women to go into labor. And I drank that, I think around 3 p.m. It was awful. I ended up getting a little sick. But then I completely skipped early labor and I was in active labor by like 6 p.m. So I have no idea if it was really the drink or if it was just enough to get things moving, but yeah, it happened pretty fast and pretty quick. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting. I tried all of the things like especially with my second, who was overdue. I was doing the evening primrose oil and dates and red raspberry leaf tea. And like, I did all of those for all 3 of my pregnancies. And then I did end up having, a membrane sweep with my second, which was the thing that actually really triggered, the process and labor. So I had that in the morning, and then I had him that night at like 10:30 p.m. or something. So throughout the day, everything it just worked. And, it happened.
We had considered doing that, but we decided we would do the drink first. And that worked. So, although not very tasty at all.
Yeah.
How do you feel? I know that we've talked about this, like, how has motherhood changed you as a person from who you were before you were a mom?
Oh, I mean, there's so many ways. And it's really interesting too, because I feel like, each of my children has changed me. Like, it's with every time that I give birth, I'm rebirthing myself, and like that old version of me dies in a way. And, I'm kind of being reborn as well, because every time you go through that process, it's just so incredibly transformational that you can't not be a different person on the other side. But I mean, I think overall, in general, I'm just so much more resilient, so much stronger, and so much more intuitive. It's really like, after I had my daughter, I think she was like around 6 months or so. And I really had this like big spiritual awakening of sorts. And, that kind of has only continued in a way. So I feel like it really opened me up in that way of like being really in tune with my body and my intuition and my spirituality, and just opening me up to that. And then of course, just like being super rock solid in my values and what I want, because, when you're a mom, there's no room for anything else than, what you decide to focus on and what you want to give your energy and attention to. Because, we know if you try to do that, if you try to split your energy and your attention, or you don't know what you want, it's just going to drain you. It's going to burn you out so quick. So you have to become really clear and really efficient and really knowledgeable about yourself and about your capacity and about your own energy.
Yeah, I 110% agree. There's no more room for like people pleasing, if that was a thing before you were a parent. Definitely becoming really deep rooted into your values, because I don't know, I feel like before kids, you're just taking care of yourself. But then when you are raising someone else, I guess you have to really start thinking about those things a lot more. And I feel like for me too, it's just such a deep, like, personal healing journey too. You learn a lot about yourself when you're parenting another child, maybe certain things that trigger you that you kind of have to work on in order to be able to show up fully and be present with your kids. It is such a transformative experience for sure, like to the core, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It brings up like you said, like certain things that you're triggered by. It's like your trauma, everything comes to the surface, and your inner child is like right there along with you and is like wanting to be seen and wanting to be heard. And certain things can be kind of re-triggered, or maybe you remember certain things about your childhood because you're kind of, experiencing it again in a way through your child's eyes. And it's really illuminating in so many ways. And it can be extremely challenging and extremely triggering, but it's all purpose because it's helping you to heal, and it's helping you to move through some of those things that you may have repressed or you may have buried deep in your subconscious that you weren't even aware of.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not always pretty, but it's necessary.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
yeah.
also like, just physically as well, what your body, first of all, what our bodies as women are capable of is just nothing short of miraculous, of like growing and nourishing and supporting these humans. And I mean, I know for me, I'm on this kind of streak, I guess, of like, it's been, I think, over 6.5 years now that I've been either pregnant and or breastfeeding. So like,
Mhm.
and I'm still nursing my youngest. And like, wow, I thank my body very often for that. Because that is
Yeah.
like, that's a lot. That's a lot of energy. It's very draining. And, not only that, but like, obviously this phase of motherhood, I'm still waking up frequently with my kids at night, and like sleep is not super great.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
have to do what I can to nourish myself in the best way possible, and like really tend to my body and give myself the proper nourishment and all of that.
Yeah. I mean, all of those things, being pregnant, giving birth, postpartum, is very taxing on the body overall, mentally and physically. I mean, the nutrients that our bodies, give up for the children. So it's so important to really focusing on that, nourishment of our bodies, but our minds too. We have to really give ourselves compassion and grace, as moms, and know that we show up and we're doing our best every single day.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more. And I think also, when you're in a challenging moment or time period, like just thinking about how temporary it all is, like how quickly it all goes, like all of these different stages, all of these different phases. And, for me, having three very young children, like it's just wild to see the progression and how quickly it all happens. And like, so
Hmm.
I know that it's limited, so even though it sounds, sometimes there's this resistance when people say, oh, enjoy it while you have it, or it goes so fast or whatever. You're like, oh, but also, there's truth in that. But also, you can validate at the same time that how challenging it is, and, the emotions that are coming up and the trauma that might be triggered and all of these things. So just like holding both, the beauty in that and knowing how fleeting it all is, but then also validating yourself and having compassion for yourself when it does feel extremely challenging.
Mhm. Yes, because it can be, especially when you are being woken up throughout the night with a newborn, or even our daughter comes in bed every single night. Last night, she wouldn't stop talking to me. So, I mean, some nights, yeah,
Yeah.
sleep is, it's a hot commodity over here, and you get it while you can.
Yeah, I know. I'd like jokingly ask myself, like, will I ever sleep a full night uninterrupted again? Which I know it'll happen. And actually, there was one night, like, I don't know, a month or two ago, where miraculously everyone slept for like the first time, like pretty much through the night. And it was just the strangest feeling. I'm like, is everything okay? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, yeah. I should go check on them. Maybe. Right.
Like everyone is sleeping now except me, because I'm like, shouldn't somebody be waking up? Or like my body is just expecting that because that's what happens so frequently. So
Mhm.
it's funny.
Yeah, it is kind of odd when that happens, but you try to soak it up when it does.
Yeah. Yeah. And just enjoying, those moments when you have it. I know it's like there's often this just push pull of motherhood of like, you want to be with your children all the time, but you want the space. And then when you have the space, you're like thinking about them, or you're looking at pictures, or like, that kind of thing too. And like that mom guilt can come in all of these different ways, and I feel like that can be challenging to navigate sometimes in the society that like seems to expect all of these different things of us at the same time, and especially as moms that are, running businesses or entrepreneurs, it's like balancing that and kind of explaining that or validating that in the eyes of, family or loved ones. It's like, it's not always easy to explain is what I'm saying, because it's not as common, so I don't know, like what your experience has been like with that journey.
Yeah, mom guilt is definitely a real thing. And being an entrepreneur, because I know we both are in that space now, it's really hard to balance, being present with your family and your children on top of like keeping up with house stuff, bills, so many different like maintenance things, but then also like trying to build a business from the ground up by yourself too. It's a lot to take in, but I also think it's something that you can give to your children as well, like the experience of building something that you have a passion for and doing it, yourself, and just kind of giving them that legacy, and just, I guess, showing too that you don't have to go and have a 9-to-5 job, like even my husband and I, well, I mean, we both went to college, we're both pharmacists, but we have zero, we're putting zero pressure on our children, because I'm also a stepmom. I have a 16-year-old stepson, and we're not putting that pressure of, yes, you have to go to college, like this is what you have to do, because then you just end up in this like mountains of debt. And then, I mean, I don't know what the percentage is, but I know it's pretty big, of people who go to college and then they're not even using their degree. And then they're just in all this debt, and then they have to work more than one job to pay off that debt. And it's just, it's crazy. So I think there's a real like entrepreneurial movement going on right now. Like a lot of people are really in this space, and it takes a lot. I mean, it takes a lot of motivation and commitment and grit to make it happen. But I think it's really kind of beautiful too, that you can really create whatever you want.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like the opportunities that are available for us now, today, in this day and age, that our mothers, our grandmothers, didn't have, especially when they were raising children at the same time. I just feel so grateful for that. And you're right. I mean, the way that the world is going and how quickly things are changing now, especially these, the past few years, like things have kind of sped up in many ways and changed at an extremely rapid pace. There really is a big movement towards that, because a lot of people were realizing or are realizing that, their jobs just weren't fulfilling, or it wasn't something they, truly enjoyed or wanted to do for the next 20 years or whatever it was. And so there is that movement. And I mean, I love what you said too, just like, it's like building a legacy. And also, one of the most beautiful and important things we can do for our children is modeling our behavior and following our passion, and knowing what we want, knowing our values, and going after our dreams, and allowing them to see that process of sticking with something and being courageous enough to follow through, even though it's not the easy way out. Like it's more challenging in a lot of ways, but I also think it's a lot more rewarding, and it will be down the line too, because, those of us who are called to this are really I think oftentimes thinking about that long-term vision of what we truly want out of life versus just, what's going to get us through this year or the next few years or whatnot. And yeah, I love what you said too about the whole putting less pressure on children to, not necessarily follow a certain pathway or a certain route or go to college or, get a 9 to 5 or whatever. Because yeah, I mean, I honestly can't imagine in 10, 15 years from now, what the workforce and the world is going to look like. It's going to be so different. I mean, with technology and with just the shift in consciousness and like everything going on, I can't even begin to predict. So yeah, I think it would do a real disservice to be putting that pressure on our children in this day and age of like, you have to follow in my footsteps or you have to do it this way because that's how I did it or that's how it's always been done. Like, no, the way forward is we're going to have to innovate and we're going to have to adapt and we're going to have to be really flexible and we're going to have to, create new pathways forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that allows us to tap into more of our creativity and more of like the right brain instead of always the left brain, and tap more into like the feminine instead of just the masculine of showing up 9 to 5, do. And I definitely think that that's where we're headed, and to provide our children with that kind of foundation of confidence, really knowing that they can do that and it's safe and it's okay. I think, gosh, I mean, just thinking about when I was in high school, I mean, the thought of, trying to start your own business, that just was not anything that was talked about at all.
Yeah. Yeah, same. I don't remember learning or hearing about that back then. I know when I was in college, so I got my master's in dietetics and then I was a registered dietitian and then transitioned into being a health coach. I think I had one class on like that was somewhat related to like business or entrepreneurship, but it was very much like obviously focused on that one thing and like, that one path. And I kind of diverted off of that path. So even that, like, I guess, it was helpful in some sense, but yeah, there's just not a lot of foundational information or learning around any of that. And I think that these are going to become the skills that are most valuable in the future of like, being able to, create your own brand and market yourself and build an online presence and all of these things and, know how to channel your gifts and your skills and your passion and all of that into something that is highly valuable and highly sought after by people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just popped in my mind. I know that you're doing human design, right? I would love to hear, because you had mentioned that you are an RD and you were in the health coaching space. So I'd love to hear how you got into the human design, like what first introduced you to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been, quite a journey of growth and evolution over several years. But I think just like going from being a dietitian into health coaching, and then I continued to kind of broaden my horizon of like, what is health and what is wellness? And there's so much more to it than we're being taught, than we're being, even what I was doing as a corporate health coach was so limiting. And by the end of that phase in my life, it felt like so restrictive, like very difficult and heavy in my body to even do that anymore, because I just felt I had outgrown it in so many ways. And after I had my daughter, I started going on this kind of spiritual journey, this healing journey of my own, and just really exploring all of these different modalities. And I've always been really fascinated by just like personality, and I minored in psychology. So I've always been really interested in psychology and just, introspecting and reflecting and like learning and knowing about ourselves, because I think that's so incredibly valuable. So a few years ago, I had a human design reading in, I think, 2019. And after hearing about it and, not really being too familiar with it, and it really blew me away. Like, it was so incredibly illuminating. And I like to say that it kind of helped me to like describe and put into words like ways that I had felt my whole life, but I had never been able to articulate or like put into words. So it was pretty amazing. And I just kind of let myself sit with that information and continue to kind of grow my knowledge on the topic. And then this past year, like last year and a half, just really kind of diving into it more and knowing that this is something that I really want to bring forth to the world, because I can see in myself and in others how just completely invaluable this information is, and how much easier it can make your life, because you get to know your own flow of energy in such an intimate way that it just really helps you to find that energetic alignment within your life, and the way that you're interacting with the world, and the way that you're making decisions, and the way that you're taking care of yourself, and you're caring for your energy and all of that. So yeah, it's been really fascinating. And since I've started, taking on clients and doing readings, it's like every single time is like, I'm just blown away by it, because it's always so resonant, and there's always something cool that like comes up or that is reflected back to me. So it's just, yeah, it's really cool.
Awesome. Well, I've heard of it. I don't really know much, but I know we have our reading next week, and I'm really, really excited to learn.
Yeah.
Because I do think there is so much, like you said, like you weren't able to put into words, how certain times that you felt a certain way, or just, anything like that, where you can work with yourself and your body and your mind instead of like working against it or thinking something is wrong with you, I think is so helpful. I mean, especially, I think just being an entrepreneur too, like, I'm sure, have you noticed like where knowing those things about yourself has helped you in that space?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can, I know my capacity a lot more, and I know like, when it's the right time for me to act on something, or when I need to wait, how to kind of best make decisions and really, really support and honor my own flow and my own energy. So it's really helpful. I mean, it's helpful with entrepreneurship and business. It's helpful with relationships, like knowing, for me, like learning the charts of my family, like, whoa. Amazing, just incredibly helpful. And then also with health and wellness, like it can give you a lot of really key pieces of information about that too, so that you can better support yourself. So yeah, I'm really excited to do your reading.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. I'm super excited.
Yeah.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation. I think we could go on forever. Is there anything else that you want to touch upon?
I think we covered a lot. I was just going to ask, I know that you do coaching like on fertility and everything, and I love your message around that, because that's an increasing concern for a lot of women in this modern day and age. So yeah, I'd love for you to just like explain a little bit more about what you do and like what you're currently offering with that.
Yeah, so well, it all really started when my husband and I decided to start our family. I had been on birth control for 13 years and I had, I was trying to do my due diligence and plan ahead. I asked my OB at the time, I've been on this for a really long time. When should I stop it versus when should I start? And she basically said I could stop it and start trying in the same month. I think maybe she was like, oh, you want to take a prenatal? And I think I already was, but there's just so much that was missed, with that recommendation. And it's really concerning. And even as a pharmacist, I was just like, okay. And I took her advice and that's exactly what I did. I stopped it in November and that's the month we started trying. And, thinking that in my mind at that time, thinking that I was healthy, that we would get pregnant right away. And we didn't. So I think a few months went by and I asked for more help. And really it was just like, oh, your cycles are regular, you're healthy, just keep trying. So, I was doing a lot of research on what I could do to improve my chances. And I came across acupuncture and how that can help with fertility. So luckily I was fortunate enough to be able to work with this acupuncturist, and he was absolutely amazing. I learned a lot about my body then as well. We all have our own constitution, and I'm more like a cooler, cold constitution, and lots of other things that he found that we worked on and focused on. And I worked with him. It was maybe a couple months into working with him, and I had actually switched offices. And I asked the new midwife I was seeing, I think it was maybe 7 months in or 8 months. And I was basically told the same thing, like, you're healthy, just keep trying. We had never taken any labs. We had never really talked about nutrition or lifestyle. So how she could really know that I was healthy, I don't really know, other than my cycles were regular. They never even confirmed ovulation. Like that was never even anything that was confirmed. So looking back now, it's just like, I don't even know how these people could tell me any of these things. But I did end up conceiving at around the 10-month mark. And I truly believe that it was the healing and the focus that I had from the acupuncture and the Chinese herbs and all of that stuff that helped me get into that space. I mean, really, the birth control, I think, caused a lot of, hormonal damage. It can do gut damage as well, nutrient damage. Even if I was taking, the prenatal while I was on the birth control, it's still like counteracting each other. So, and also I would say looking back, I was just completely disconnected with my body and my cycle. I mean, I hadn't experienced a regular cycle in over a decade. I mean, I think I was 28 when we first started trying, and I was on birth control for 13 years. That was almost half of my life. Like when you think about it like that. So it was that experience, and then also my pregnancy experience too. I mean, when I was still at the OB office, they gave little to no guidance on nutrition. And there's so many things you can do to put yourself and your baby in a really, really good space in terms of like health and well-being. And they didn't touch upon any of that. And, I did a lot of research when I was pregnant, and I decided, I was like, I'm not doing this glucose test. Like, I'm not drinking this syrup with red dye and corn syrup or God knows what else is in there.
Yeah.
And the midwife looked at me like I was crazy. I was like, I'll do the continuous glucose monitor for 2 weeks, which really gives you a much better picture than having someone drink this really sugary drink and seeing how their body responds to that. Because I wasn't keto while I was pregnant, but I was keto before I got pregnant and was still very relatively low carb. So I knew that my body would not respond well to that drink on top of everything that was in it. So I think when you put all of those things together, I just was like, wow, there's so many gaps in terms of healthcare and support for women. It's like mind blowing. And this is such a delicate and important part. Like, we are creating life for like future generations, and we're not even like counseling women on proper nutrition or lifestyle. I mean, I was still working in retail. I was working 12-hour shifts. I mean, my stress levels, I can't even really imagine what they were at that time. And just so many things that could impact, make or break your fertility, and also the health of your baby when you are pregnant. So, um, yeah, I started my business in 2021, and that's just kind of when I was like, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to help women on their journey. I'm going to help them feel empowered and confident, because there's so many things that a lot of us don't know because we're not taught. So to be that space to kind of hold someone and guide them while they're trying to figure this out, because so many emotions come up when you're struggling to get pregnant. Um, so yeah, that's kind of how that started, at least. Was really my own journey. And then also being in retail pharmacy, just seeing, fertility aside, like the state that people are in. People
Mm-hmm.
have so many chronic conditions in young people too. I mean, people my age or younger were on laundry lists of medications, and nobody knows what they're taking or why they're taking it. All they know is that their doctor said, you should take this because of XYZ. And, you know, so many missed opportunities for helping people to get back to a state of health, instead of really just enabling them to continue with poor lifestyle choices, and then like just keeping them alive with some of these medications. So I think all of that combined, I'm just like, yeah, there's got to be um a change there, and people need more help and more like guidance, one-on-one help, to really get them to a space where they can feel good, and then in terms of fertility, where they can get pregnant, but then also take what they've learned on their fertility journey and pass that on to future generations too.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredibly important, and what an amazing mission that you have, and like identifying the gaps and the just how backwards so much of the healthcare system is. And I mean, that could be like a whole other, conversation,
Oh
because,
yeah.
I'm coming from working for a health insurance company for 8 years as a health coach. And, I mean, the intentions were good, especially with my role and my team. But overall, like just being in that environment and working for a health insurance company, I did see too clearly firsthand that this isn't it, this isn't the way to true
Hmm.
lasting holistic well-being. Like
Hmm.
there's just so many gaps, there's so much missing, there's so much that people aren't aware of, or that they just don't receive any guidance on. It's just pretty wild when you start to kind of learn that for yourself and raise your awareness around it. And it can be pretty staggering, to be like, oh my gosh, we're in pretty rough shape.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah,
once you see it and you know it, you can't unknow what you now
yeah,
know.
exactly. Right. Which is why, yeah, I mean, I felt so conflicted for especially the last few years of working there, of like, yeah, just feeling this almost like moral dissonance, I guess, within myself, of like, there needs to be more to this. This needs to be deeper. I feel like I'm not able to actually help people in like a meaningful way. And that's really tough. And I'm sure that, that was similar for you too, like being in that role that you were as a pharmacist and being like, I'm not really helping people. Like, is this really helping them? Is it harming them? Is it just kind of keeping the status quo? Like, and knowing that there's so much more that you could be doing and that you were obviously called to do. So yeah, it's just, it's really fascinating, to see like the evolution of our paths and journeys. And like, we needed those experiences as a catalyst of growth and of evolution and of, our missions, in this life. So
Absolutely. Yeah. I think when you're open to these shifts and these changes and you embrace them versus like fighting them, that can really, really be helpful too.
Yes. Yeah. That's a whole thing. Cause so many people they think that this is the only way, or like that's the way it is. And who am I to like stand up to this gigantic system or corporation or, health insurance company or whatever? Like, I'm just one person. What difference could I possibly make? But when that's your mindset, then you end up going against your values, you go against your intuition. And that really is a big source of dis-ease in the body. As we know, like so much of it is emotional. When you do that to yourself, when you shut that down, when you're so disconnected, that's what ends up kind of seeding and creating a lot of the disease that people end up developing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, this was definitely a packed conversation. Yes. I'm so grateful that we were able to have this conversation and dive into all these topics. And I know that we can share how to reach one another, like where people can find us, and Instagram or websites or whatever. And I know I'll put yours in the show notes, and I'm sure we can do that so that we can, kind of allow people to continue to connect and find us and follow us and all that good stuff.
Yes, absolutely. I will do the same. It was really an amazing conversation. I love speaking with like-minded individuals who have the awareness to everything that's going on in with themselves. So it was a beautiful conversation.
All right. Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and take care.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Rising into Mindful Motherhood podcast. If this episode resonated with you or gave you an aha moment, stop what you're doing right now and write a review. This simple act of kindness helps me get this podcast out to connect with as many women as I possibly can. I also have a special offer. If you send me a screenshot of your review, I will take $250 off one of my premium coaching containers. Let me know what resonated with you the most and why. So connect with me in my free Facebook community or tag me on Instagram. You'll find both listed below. Thanks again from the bottom of my heart for tuning in to this episode, and I'll see you next time.